Israel's military says it has begun a major new offensive in Gaza, launching extensive airstrikes on the territory. Gaza's Hamas-run civil defense says more than 100 people were killed on Friday. Israel's army released this footage purporting to show strikes on Hamas military sites. Israel says the new offensive is aimed at freeing the hostages and dismantling Hamas, which carried out the October 7 terror attacks. The United Nations says Israel's actions are tantamount to ethnic cleansing. The UN human rights chief says Gazans are being displaced and facing widespread starvation due to a months-long blockade on humanitarian aid.
An Israeli airstrike targets Jabalia in northern Gaza. The Strip is experiencing one of the deadliest phases of bombardment since a truce collapsed in March. The occupants of this house were buried when it collapsed. Israel says it struck 150 targets across Gaza, including missile posts and terrorist cells. Once again, Palestinians are fleeing for their lives. Many are heading south, but nowhere in Gaza is safe.
God kept us and our children safe, so we got out. We're tired, and I have a little newborn.
They've displaced us. Civilians are dying. There is hunger, thirst, fear and destruction. Nothing is left of our lives. This is the 10th time I have been displaced.
Now the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights is sounding the alarm.
This latest barrage of bombs, forcing people to move amid the threat of intensified attacks, the methodical destruction of entire neighbourhoods and the denial of humanitarian assistance underlines that there appears to be a push for a permanent demographic shift in Gaza in defiance of international law. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk says this is tantamount to ethnic cleansing.
The intensified bombing of Gaza comes as an Israeli blockade of the territory is in its third month, leaving people without essential food and supplies. A crisis Donald Trump has acknowledged.
We're looking at Gaza, and we got to get that taken care of. A lot of people are starving. A lot of people there's a lot of bad things going on.
Any hope that Trump's trip to the Middle East would bring an end to the violence have been dashed. All people here can do now is bury their dead.
And we can get more now on the latest offensive in Gaza from DW Senior international correspondent Fanny Facsar, who is in Jerusalem. So, Fanny, the Israeli military said it had launched extensive strikes in Gaza. What more can you tell us?
But just looking at those pictures, certainly there's no doubt about it that Israel has entered a new phase in this war, a very devastating one, which has been approved by the Security Cabinet earlier this month. And that approval doesn't only include more and more airstrikes, but also pushing, as we have seen play out before already, pushing people from one place to the other, here from the north to the south. But these airstrikes are not only happening in the north, but alone this week there have been several airstrikes in Khan Younis and other parts of the south of the Strip. So the most logical question, obviously, that then comes along is, how do you move even, again, displaced several times already, to the south under fire, while people are not only lacking the very basics, and that is access to food, but also access to shelter. These people are tired and they want this war obviously to end. But Israel says this is the only way forward to eliminate Hamas, and that this is the only way forward to release hostages. But the relatives of those remaining hostages in Gaza Strip speak a different language. In fact, this week there was much hope after the release of the only surviving American-Israeli hostage that maybe this could kickstart in some way or the other talks between Hamas militants and Israel of some sort of a ceasefire, especially since US President Trump has been touring the Middle East, and there was a delegation in Qatar, an Israeli delegation, an American delegation. What we see is the complete opposite. Some of the most darkest days, this is what people in the Strip are currently experiencing.
Right, and the UN says that no aid has entered Gaza since more than 2 months now. What are the consequences? What are we seeing there?
Well, just very visually speaking, we see the desperation of the people who've been denied aid for more than 2 months now. Looking at reports, just looking at numbers, 1 in 4 of that Gaza population, that amounts to 500,000 people at least, is facing starvation. And it's very logical to do the math. The longer this continues, the more people are going to face starvation and malnourishment. Now, there's been a plan put forward here, backed by the US, and a very controversial plan by Israel called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But there's not much humanitarian about it. A lot of people say, especially the United Nations, who say, look, there's a lot of aid just across the border from Gaza in Egypt. Trucks after trucks are waiting to get in. There's also tons of material in Jordan. Let that aid in. The repetitive calls by the head of the UN aid. But Israel says they are claiming, without showing actually evidence, that all of this aid has been hijacked by Hamas militants and that they want to set up their own operation. But even if this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation begins to operate, it's not going to happen before the end of the month, and hence the question, what is going to happen until then? Very obviously, seeing the pictures coming out there from Gaza, what we see is more desperation and basically the surmounting question by people there getting up in the morning who survived the past night, that question, how to survive today, how to feed themselves and how to feed their children.
Well, DW senior international correspondent Fanny Facsar in Jerusalem. Fanny, thank you so much. And the war in Gaza is expected to dominate the annual summit of the Arab League, which kicks off today in Baghdad. The gathering in the Iraqi capital follows an emergency meeting of Arab leaders in Cairo in March. Back then, they agreed on a plan for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip without displacing its roughly 2 million people. All right, let's bring in journalist Karim El-Gawhary. He joins us now from Cairo. Karim, first of all, what can we expect from this Arab League summit in Baghdad?
Well, there is already a draft resolution that is circulating. And of course, the main topic is the situation in the Gaza Strip. This draft resolution asks for an immediate end of the war in Gaza. It urges the international community to assume their moral and legal responsibilities, to pressure to end the bloodshed and to ensure the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. By the way, also the Secretary General, UN Secretary General will be, and the Spanish Prime Minister will be both present in Baghdad today. This so-called Baghdad declaration also reiterates the categorical rejection of any form of displacement or expulsion of the Palestinian people from their land. And it supports, again, this joint Arab-Islamic plan for reconstruction of Gaza that was emerging during the last emergency Arab summit in Cairo last March. It says it will welcome any proposal to set up an Arab fund. And maybe one interesting detail also, they're trying to set up some kind of Arab fund to care for the approximately 40,000 orphans in Gaza in cooperation with the UN.
All right. Before there can be reconstruction, there has to be an end of fighting, and there needs to be aid allowed in to all the Gazans there. Now, Donald Trump, during his Middle East trip, he's acknowledged that the people in Gaza are starving, that they do need help. Can we expect any pressure from the US to at least let the aid enter into Gaza?
Well, really, at the end, nobody knows what is in Trump's head. At one point, he was talking about displacing the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and create some kind of Riviera of the Middle East in the Gaza Strip. Then lately, also during the trip, during his trip to the Gulf states in the last days, he was just showing some signs that he sees and understands the plight of the Palestinian people. To then in Qatar again talk about a so-called freedom zone in Gaza under US control. leaving it completely unclear what should happen then in this freedom zone with the Palestinians living there. And now the newest twist, I think they're setting up another test balloon. There is talk about a US plan to displace 1 million Palestinians from Gaza to Libya. But it's not clear how real this proposal really is. There's some leaks in the press, and there's certainly absolutely no response from the Libyan side.
All right. Journalist Karim El-Gawhary in Cairo. Karim, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.